In this country, there's a lot of wrong that has been committed by our society, and the negative stereotypes and ideals have not been helped, but rather perpetuated by our mainstream media sources. One of the most serious transgressions are against the Muslims and people of the Middle East in our country and around the world. Our media demonizes the people of the Middle East after acts of terror committed by small minorities of religious zealots and extremists, intended to sow xenophobia and paranoia throughout America. This deepens a prejudice throughout our society for people who look different than the average American and who pray to God in a different manner. The exposure of the truths of how Middle Eastern people are treated in our society through media and telling the stories of the people who are also affected by terrorist attacks more so is the only way we're going to make changes in our perception of the Middle East as a society. Dr. Reza Aslan is a professor at the University of California, Riverside, and has a PhD in religion, meaning that he studies different religions and is well-versed in different traditions and cultures. But since he is a Muslim, that is all people can see whenever he writes a book about another religion, especially Christianity. In an interview with Fox News Network that was intended to be about a book he wrote in 2013 entitled Zealot, The Life and Times of Jesus of Nazareth, he was asked more questions about his faith and if he was even qualified to talk about Jesus due to the fact that he was a Muslim. Dr. Aslan repeats to the interviewer about 3 times that he has been studying for religion for about 20 years and has a PhD for his studies, but the interviewer's own biases, as well as the bias of other people who asked him questions, only saw that he was a Muslim man talking about Jesus. When it comes to Muslim people in America, all anyone sees is religion. Why does that matter so much? No one is aiming to convert anyone anymore. This isn't the Crusades or the periods of imperial colonization. We are in the 21st century, where people are still afraid or angry with people who happen to have a different view on religion than they do. One of the reasons that people believe that different is dangerous is because of the possibility of a small minority of people within the different that may aim to cause them harm. In this interview with CNN, Reza Aslan has to deal with biased questions that the Middle Eastern and Muslim-majority countries all practice barbaric customs and inequality for women. Dr. Aslan does an amazing job of refuting these ideas by stating that most Muslim-majority countries do not practice things like genital mutilation, stoning, and oppressive laws on women, and that some of these countries have had women heads of state. There's a common misconception that the people of the Middle East are all barbarians that are fueled by spreading their religion and crushing anyone who wants to say anything
that we've
different.
been talking about ISIS and their terrible actions in Iraq and Syria. Saudi Arabia, our closest ally, has beheaded 19 people. Nobody seems to care about that because Saudi Arabia sort of preserves our national interests.
Okay.
You know, this is the problem, is that these kinds of conversations that we're having aren't really being had in any kind of legitimate way. We're not.
Question at the bottom of the screen that everyone is looking at. Does Islam promote violence?
Islam doesn't promote violence or peace. Islam is just a religion, and like every religion in the world, it depends on what you bring to it. If you're a violent person, your Islam, your Judaism, your Christianity, your Hinduism.
Why is it that Islam is the only one to blame in terms of violent actions being taken out by groups of people? Have we forgotten that in our own country, we've had groups that use Christianity to fuel their hates and actions against people who are different, most notoriously the Ku Klux Klan? We're not the only ones who are affected by acts of terrorism in the world, but we act like it. It is right to mourn for those lost too early in something as awful as a mass killing, but our media seems to turn a blind eye to the deaths of those in the Middle East. Groups like Al-Qaeda and Daesh pride themselves on making the world in their image, and that means anyone who does not fit the bill for their new world order is fair game for cleansing. Oftentimes, terrorist attacks happen in the Middle East, and no one reports the innocent lives lost over there the way they do in America and Europe. Last November, there was a terrible bombing in Paris where 130 people were killed and hundreds more were injured. Social media was ablaze with people supporting France during this time of fear and loss. People changed their profile pictures to the words "Pray for Paris," or had their original picture silhouetted in red, white, and blue patterns of the France flag. People felt Paris's pain, But all the while, Syria is under the constant fear of death and by bomb and bullet. Villages and towns of Middle Easterners are raided and destroyed by the self-proclaimed Islamic State, and women and children in Nigeria are being murdered by Boko Haram because they practice the same faith differently. Where are the Pray for Nigeria posts? And the media coverages in Syria, Baghdad, and Istanbul when hundreds of people were killed by the bombs of their fellow Muslims. Just this summer, on July 5th, there was a bombing in Medina carried out by Daesh. Medina is one of the holiest sites of the Islamic people. It is where Muhammad lived for most of his life when he was trying to make Mecca a place for Muslims to practice their religion freely. It is where he gave many sermons and led the Muslim faith in the beginning. Long story short, anyone claiming to be a Muslim or the Islamic State would never think of destroying any small part of land that is important to the history and culture of what you claim to be purifying. Yet the reports that followed the bombings yielded no sympathy. No one was there to support the holy city or console the people of Islam. There should not be a double standard for people who have lost their lives or something important to who they are to the violence of evil men. All deaths should be mourned. All people deserve respect and the common decency of having their story told, and we should stand for those who cannot stand for themselves, despite any differences that we have.